World War I, the history. The First World War, sometimes referred to as the Great War, was a global battle that began in 1914 and continued until 1918. The majority of the fighting took place in Europe, but it also took place in a number of other places of the world. In the First World War, countries from all over the world took part, including many of the main powers in Europe as well as countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. In total, there were close to 30 countries that were directly involved in the fight. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in 1914 is generally regarded as the event that precipitated the outbreak of World War I. This occurrence, in conjunction with a complicated web of alliances and tensions amongst the main countries in Europe, was a contributing factor in the beginning of the war. During the course of the war, the major powers were subdivided into two primary alliances, the Central Powers and the Allies, also known as the Entente. The United States of America, Italy, and a few other nations joined the Allies after they had already been formed with France, Russia, and the United Kingdom as their core members. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire were the countries that comprised the Central Powers during World War I. Imperialism, nationalism, militarism, and other forms of alliances were the primary contributors to the outbreak of World War I. Imperialism, often known as the competition for colonies and territories, was a significant factor that contributed to the beginning of the conflict. Nationalism, sometimes known as passionate pride in one's country, was another factor that contributed to the conflict. Alliances, which are agreements between countries to provide mutual support to one another in times of crisis, were another factor that contributed to the onset of the war. These were agreements in which countries agreed to defend one another against assault. As a final contributing factor, militarism, sometimes known as the exaltation of military force, was a significant factor in the outbreak of the conflict. This was due to the fact that many nations had been increasing their military capacity and were anxious to put it to use. The effects of World War I were widespread and persisted for a very long time. The conflict was responsible for a considerable number of deaths, with estimates ranging from 6 million to 13 million civilians and 8.5 million military having been killed. The conflict was responsible for not only the physical destruction of many cities and towns but also the uprooting of millions of people from their homes. In addition, there was a severe impact on the economy as a result of the conflict, which manifested itself in high levels of debt, inflation, and unemployment. Additionally, the conflict played a role in the propagation of communism as well as the decline of colonial empires. In World War I, many types of artillery, such as heavy cannons and mortars, were utilized, in addition to brand new forms of weaponry, including as tanks and chemical weapons. It was the first time that machine guns, submarines, and airplanes had been employed on such a wide scale when the war broke out, and it was also the first time that these weapons had been used. In summing up, the First World War was a catastrophic worldwide battle that had far-reaching repercussions for the world. In spite of the horrible toll that the war took, it was ultimately responsible for great advancements in technology as well as the abolition of colonialism.